The rain on Vaharafor never truly stopped. It came down in sheets during the storms and fell as a fine mist when the clouds were tired. Taiho Park had learned to work through both. After 3 months alone on this jungle planet, he had learned to work through almost anything. The research station was small. Just 4 rooms built from reinforced metal, sitting on a hill that overlooked an endless sea of purple trees. The Galactic Survey Corps had sent Taiho here to study the wildlife. They gave him cameras, sensors, and enough food to last a year. They also gave him a warning. Stay away from the Vorani. Taiho had seen the files. The Vorani were the top predators on this world. They looked like wolves, but they were not wolves. They stood almost 2 meters tall at the shoulder and walked on 6 powerful legs. Their fur was black as night, and strange lights glowed beneath their skin. These lights changed color with their moods. Blue meant calm. Red meant danger. No human had ever seen what gold meant, because no human had ever gotten close enough to find out. The Survey Corps believed the Varani might be intelligent. Not human intelligent, but smart enough to use basic tools and hunt in organized groups. This made them interesting to scientists and terrifying to everyone else. The rule was simple. Observe from far away, never make contact, and run if they came too close. Taiho followed these rules. He was a careful man. He set up his cameras in the trees and watched the Varani from his screens. He saw them hunt. He saw them play. He saw the adults teach the young ones how to track prey through the mud. Sometimes, late at night, he heard them calling to each other across the valley. Their voices were deep and musical, like drums mixed with singing. He was lonely, but he did not mind. Taiho had always been comfortable with silence. He talked to himself while he worked, fixed broken sensors, wrote long reports that nobody would read for months. The days passed slowly, and he found peace in the routine. Then the cub appeared. It happened on a morning like any other. Taiho was kneeling in the mud near the perimeter fence, trying to repair a weather sensor that the rain had damaged. His tools were spread around him, and his focus was entirely on the broken wires in his hands. He felt something tug at his boot. Taiho looked down and froze. A small creature sat beside his foot, its teeth wrapped around the edge of his boot. It was clearly a Varani, but tiny, no bigger than a house cat. Its fur was fluffy and soft, not yet grown into the sleek coat of an adult. Its eyes were silver, wide with curiosity, and the lights beneath its skin glowed a soft, gentle blue. The cub tugged again, growling in a voice too small to be threatening. Taiho did not move. His training told him to back away slowly. Do not engage. Do not interact. But the cub was so small, and its growl was so silly, that he found himself smiling instead. Where did you come from? He whispered. The cub released his boot and tilted its head. It made a chirping sound, almost like a question. Taiho knew he should report this. He should go inside, seal the door, and wait for the cub to leave. Its pack was surely nearby. An adult Varani were not creatures he wanted to meet. But the cub just sat there, watching him with those silver eyes, and something in Taiho's chest softened. You should go home, he said quietly. Your mother is probably worried. The cub chirped again and pounced on one of his tools. It batted the screwdriver across the mud, chasing it with clumsy enthusiasm. Taiho watched, amazed. It was playing. Just like a puppy. Just like any young creature in the galaxy that had not yet learned to be afraid. He finished his repairs and went back inside. When he looked out the window an hour later, the cub was gone. But it came back the next day. And the day after that, Taiho tried to ignore it. He truly did. He worked with his back to the cub, pretending it was not there. But the creature was persistent. It nipped at his boots. It stole his tools. It climbed onto his supply crates and watched him with endless fascination. Once, when Taiho sat down to eat his lunch outside, The cub crawled into his lap and fell asleep. He named it Bori. It was a silly name, a small name, the kind of name you give to something soft and harmless. Taiho knew that Bori would not stay small forever. One day, this cub would grow into a predator that could tear him apart. But for now, it was just a baby. A lonely baby, far from its pack, looking for something it could not name. Perhaps they were not so different after all. Taiho started leaving food out. Small pieces of the dried meat from his rations. Bori devoured them eagerly and began to wait by the station door each morning. The cub's lights glowed brighter when Taiho appeared, shifting from blue to something warmer, almost like happiness. This is stupid, Taiho told himself every day. This is so incredibly stupid. But he could not stop. Loneliness was a disease, and Bori was the only cure this planet offered. Taiho talked to the cub while he worked, telling it about his home on Earth, about the sister he missed, about the dreams he'd had as a boy. Bori did not understand his words, but it listened. It always listened, head tilted, eyes bright, as if Taiho was the most interesting thing in the entire universe. The weeks passed. The rain continued to fall, and slowly, without meaning to, Taiho began to love the small creature that had wandered into his life. He knew it was dangerous. He knew the rules existed for good reasons. But sometimes, on a world far from home, the rules felt very small, and the need for connection felt very, very big. Taiho did not know that Bori's pack watched from the shadows of the jungle. He did not know that they had sent their youngest to test this strange two-legged creature who lived in the metal box on the hill. He did not know that everything was about to change. He only knew that for the first time in 3 months, he was not alone. And that was enough. 2 months had passed since Bori first appeared at the station. The cub was growing quickly now, already twice the size it had been when Taiho found it chewing on his boot. Its fur had darkened from gray to deep black, and the lights beneath its skin glowed stronger each day. But its personality remained the same, playful, curious, endlessly demanding of attention. Taiho's daily routine had changed completely. He woke each morning to find Bori waiting outside his door, chirping impatiently. They ate breakfast together, Taiho with his ration pack and Bori with whatever meat he could spare. Then they worked together, which mostly meant Taiho worked while Bori caused problems nearby. The cub had a talent for chaos. It knocked over equipment. It dragged tools into the mud. It once spent an entire afternoon trying to dig a hole beneath the station's foundation, for reasons that Taiho could not begin to understand. But he could not stay angry. Bori would look at him with those silver eyes, and all his frustration would melt away. "You're lucky you're cute," Taiho said often. "Otherwise I would have shipped you to a zoo by now." Bori always chirped in response, as if it understood the joke. Taiho knew he was breaking every rule in the Survey Corps' handbook. He had stopped filing accurate reports weeks ago. His messages to the orbital station mentioned the Vorani only in general terms. Population stable, no dangerous encounters, research continuing as planned. He never mentioned Bori. He never mentioned the strange friendship growing between a human scientist and an alien predator. He told himself it was because the Corps would not understand. They would send a team to remove the cub. They would put Bori in a cage and study it like a specimen. Taiho could not allow that. Bori was not a specimen. Bori was his friend. The day everything changed started like any other. The rain had stopped for once, and pale sunlight filtered through the clouds. Taiho was outside, adjusting the angle of a solar panel, when Bori trotted over and bit his ankle. It was not a hard bite. Bori never bit hard. The cub had learned early that human skin was fragile, and it was always careful with its teeth. This bite was just a nip, a gentle pressure through the thick fabric of Taiho's boot. A way of saying, "Pay attention to me." Taeho looked down. Bori stared up at him, eyes bright, tail wagging slowly. The cub bit again, a little harder this time. It made a sound deep in its throat, almost like a challenge. "What do you want now?" Taeho asked, amused. Bori released his ankle and stepped back. It lowered its front legs and raised its hindquarters, the universal pose of a young animal inviting play. Then it darted forward and bit his boot again, tugging sharply. Taeho laughed. He had seen this behavior before. Bori wanted to wrestle, the way young Varani wrestled with their siblings. But Taeho was not a Varani. He could not roll in the mud and snap his teeth without looking ridiculous. Still, something made him want to try. Without thinking too deeply about what he was doing, Taeho knelt down. Bori immediately pounced on him, paws against his chest, tongue licking his face. Taeho grabbed the cub and gently pushed it away, and Bori bounced back for more. They played like that for several minutes. Bori bit at Taeho's hands, always gentle, always careful. Taeho grabbed at Bori's legs, pretending to catch the cub and then letting it escape. It was silly and childish, and the most fun Taeho had experienced in months. Then Bori stopped. The cub sat back on its haunches and stared at Taeho with sudden intensity. Its lights flickered beneath its fur, shifting through colors too fast to follow. It leaned forward and bit Taeho's wrist with careful precision. Not a playing bite. Something different. Something deliberate. Bori held the bite for a long moment, eyes locked on Taeho's face. Then it released him and waited. Taeho did not understand what was happening, but he felt somehow that a response was expected. Bori had bitten him in a specific way, and now the cub was watching to see what he would do. He thought about all the behavior he had observed over the past months. The way the adult Varani greeted each other. The way mothers carried their young. The way pack members touched noses and pressed their bodies together in recognition. And he remembered something he had seen on his cameras weeks ago. Two Varani meeting after a hunt, biting each other's ears in what looked like affection. Taeho leaned forward. Slowly, gently, he took Bori's ear between his teeth and applied the smallest amount of pressure. A human bite, soft, harmless, but a bite nonetheless. Bor, I went completely still. For a terrible moment, Taeho thought he had made a horrible mistake. The cub's lights stopped flickering. Its body tensed. Its silver eyes went wide. Then the lights exploded into gold. Bright, brilliant gold, glowing from every inch of Bori's small body. The cub began to shake, not with fear, but with something else. Joy. Pure, overwhelming joy. It threw itself at Taeho, climbing onto his chest, pressing its face against his neck, making sounds he had never heard before. Whimpers and cries and something that sounded almost like laughter. "Bori?" Taeho gasped. "What did I do? What's happening?" But Bori could not answer. The cub just held on to him, glowing gold in the pale sunlight, trembling with an emotion too big for its small body. Taeho held the cub and stroked its fur and did not understand. He did not know that he had just performed one of the most sacred acts in Varani culture. He did not know that a return bite meant acceptance. It meant belonging. It meant family. Among the Varani, you could not choose your pack. Your pack chose you, and when they chose you, they bit you, and you bit them back. And from that moment forward, you were bound together. Parent and child. Mate and mate. Brother and sister. The bite was a promise. The bite was a bond. The bite was forever. Bori had bitten Taeho, and Taeho had bitten back. In the eyes of a young Varani cub, this human was no longer a stranger. This human was no longer an outsider. This human was pack. That night, Bori did not leave the station. The cub curled up beside Taeho's bed and slept there, still glowing faintly gold. And far away, deep in the jungle, The rest of the pack raised their voices in a song that Taiho could not understand. Their youngest had found something special. Their youngest had found a new brother. Soon, they would come to meet him. The message from the Survey Corps arrived 3 days after the pack settled around the station. Director Hana Song was coming to Vihara 4 personally. She would arrive within the week. There would be a full investigation. Yuna had tried to file a neutral report, describing the situation in careful scientific terms. First contact established. Non-hostile interaction confirmed. Further study recommended. But somewhere between the orbital station and regional command, the message had become something else. Dangerous wildlife surrounding human personnel. Protocol violations. Possible contamination of research subject. Taiho read the response with growing dread. The Corps was sending soldiers. They don't understand, he said to Yuna. They think the pack is a threat, isn't it? She asked quietly. 12 apex predators camped outside your door. Most people would call that a threat. They bring me food. Taiho gestured toward the pile of fresh meat near the station entrance. The pack hunted every morning, and they always left a portion for their new human member. They sleep in the rain so I can sleep inside. Yesterday, one of the juveniles found a snake near the generator and killed it before it could bite me. Does that sound like a threat? Yuna did not answer. She had spent the past 3 days observing the pack, recording their sounds, watching their interactions. She had seen things that no xenolinguist had ever witnessed. The complex social structure, the careful division of labor, the obvious affection between pack members. These were not simple animals. They were people, different from humans in almost every way, but people nonetheless. But she also knew how the Survey Corps worked. They dealt in categories, safe or dangerous, useful or worthless, ours or theirs. The Varani did not fit neatly into any category, and that made them a problem. Director Hana Song arrived on a gray morning with heavy rain. Her shuttle was larger than Yuna's, and it carried 8 soldiers in full combat armor. They spread out across the clearing in a defensive formation, weapons raised. Eyes scanning for targets, the pack watched from the tree line. They had retreated. When the shuttle appeared, melting back into the jungle with silent grace. Only Bori remained, pressed against Taiho's leg, growling softly at the strangers. Hana stepped out of the shuttle. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked at Taiho, then at Bori, then at the shadows between the trees. Her expression revealed nothing. Sergeant Park, she said. You've been busy. Director, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Lieutenant Choi, secure the perimeter. The soldier beside her nodded. He was young and hard-faced, with the look of a man who had seen combat. He signaled his team, and they began to move around the station in a tight pattern. Bori's growl grew louder. Its lights flickered red and orange, colors that Taiho had never seen before. Warning colors. Fear colors. Call off your men, Taiho said. The pack won't attack unless they feel threatened. The pack is the threat, Lieutenant Dewan Choi replied coldly. We're here to remove it. Remove it how? Tranquilizers first. If that doesn't work, we have other options. Taiho felt his blood go cold. You're gonna kill them, if necessary. They're intelligent. They have language. They have culture. They chose to make peace with us, and you want to respond with violence? Director Hana raised her hand. Enough, both of you. She studied Taiho with those sharp eyes. Explain to me exactly what happened here, from the beginning. Taiho told her everything. The cub. The weeks of growing friendship. The bite that had changed everything. The pack's arrival and their acceptance of him as one of their own. He held nothing back. When he finished, Hana was silent for a long moment. You violated protocol, she said finally. You should have reported the first contact immediately. You should have maintained proper distance. You should have followed the rules. The rules were wrong. Perhaps Hana looked toward the jungle. But rules exist for reasons. You've created a situation we don't know how to handle. A sound from the trees interrupted her. One of the young Vorani emerged from the shadows, moving slowly, deliberately. The soldiers raised their weapons, but the creature ignored them. It walked straight toward Hana, carrying something in its mouth. Lieutenant Do-hwan stepped forward. "Director, get back." "Wait." Hana did not move. The juvenile stopped a few meters away and gently set down its burden. Then it retreated, rejoining the pack in the shadows. Yuna approached carefully and picked up the object. It was a piece of metal, twisted and burned, part of a ship's hull. Letters were stamped into the surface. GSC 7794. "The Wanderer," Yuna whispered. "The survey ship that disappeared 8 years ago." Hannah's face changed. Where did they find this? "They've been collecting human artifacts for years," Taiho said. "I've seen their collection. Pieces of ships, broken equipment, old satellites. They keep them like treasures." "Why?" Taiho remembered what Yuna had told him about how the Vorani communicated, about how they understood more than anyone suspected. "Because they've been watching us," he said, "learning about us, waiting for someone who might understand them." He looked at Bori, still pressed against his leg. "The cub didn't wander to my station by accident. The pack sent their youngest, their most adaptable. They wanted to make contact, and they chose to do it on their own terms." Silence fell over the clearing. The rain continued to fall. The soldiers held their weapons ready, but their eyes were uncertain now. Director Hannah looked at the piece of wreckage in Yuna's hands. She looked at the shadows between the trees, where dozens of glowing lights watched and waited. She looked at Taiho, standing with an alien predator at his side, defended by creatures that should have killed him on sight. "They chose us," Taiho said quietly. "They've been choosing us for years. The question is whether we're smart enough to choose them back." Hannah did not answer immediately. She was thinking, calculating, weighing options that Taiho could not see. The future of two species hung in the balance, decided by a small woman in a muddy clearing on a world far from home. Lieutenant Do-hwan broke the silence. "Director, with respect, we have our orders. These creatures are dangerous. We can't just—" "I know our orders," Hana said. "I also know an opportunity when I see one." She turned to face the jungle, squaring her shoulders. "Sergeant Park, can you arrange a meeting, a proper one, between me and the pack leader?" Taiho felt hope bloom in his chest. "I can try." "Then try. We've come too far to turn back now." In the shadows, the old female's light shifted from red to gold. She had been listening. She had been waiting, and now, finally, the real conversation could begin. The supply shuttle arrived on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the gray clouds like a silver blade. Taiho watched it descend from the station window, Bori pressed against his leg. He had almost forgotten that other humans existed. The shuttle landed in the clearing, and a woman stepped out. She was young, with short black hair and intelligent eyes. She carried a bag over one shoulder and a tablet in her hand. Taiho recognized her from the mission briefings. Yuna Kim, xenolinguist, stationed on the orbital platform above Vihora 4. She was supposed to drop off supplies and collectives. Research data. She was not supposed to find a Vorani cub sitting on his doorstep. Yuna froze when she saw Bori. The tablet slipped from her fingers and landed in the mud. Her face went pale. "Taiho," she said very slowly. "There is a Vorani next to you." "I know," he said. "It's touching you." "I know. Why is it glowing gold?" Taiho sighed. This was going to be difficult to explain. "You should probably come inside. I'll make tea." They sat in the station's small kitchen while Bori explored the shuttle outside. Yuna listened to Taiho's story without interruption. Her face moved through several expressions: shock, disbelief, concern, and finally something that looked like wonder. "You bit it back," she said when he finished. "You actually bit it back. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Do you have any idea what that means in Varani culture?" Taiho shook his head. He had guessed that it was significant, but he had never found any detailed information in the Survey Corps' database. Yuna leaned forward. "I've been studying their vocalizations for 2 years. We've picked up fragments of their communication, enough to understand some basic concepts. The bite is everything to them. It's how they form bonds, how they create families. When a Varani bites you and you bite back, you're not just playing. You're making a promise. You're saying, 'I accept you. I claim you. You are mine, and I am yours.'" The words hung in the air between them. "So Bori thinks I'm family," Taiho said slowly. "Not just thinks. As far as that cub is concerned, you are family. You are pack." Yuna paused, which means the rest of the pack probably knows by now. They share information somehow. We've never figured out exactly how, but they communicate across distances. If Bori accepted you, the others will know. As if summoned by her words, Bori suddenly appeared at the window. The cub was making urgent sounds, pressing its nose against the glass. Its lights flickered rapidly. Blue, gold, Taiho stood. Something felt wrong. "What is it?" He opened the door and stepped outside. Yuna followed, staying close behind him. The jungle at the edge of the clearing had come alive. Shapes moved between the trees. Large shapes. Black fur and glowing lights, watching from the shadows. Taiho counted 12. 12 adult Varani, each one massive enough to kill him with a single swipe of their claws. They stood in a loose circle around the station, silent and still. Yuna grabbed his arm. "We need to get back inside, now." But Taiho did not move. He was watching the largest Varani, an old female who stood slightly apart from the others. Her muzzle was crossed with pale scars, and her eyes held a weight that spoke of many years. She looked at Taiho with calm intensity. Bori chirped and ran toward the old female. The cub pressed against her legs, nuzzling her fur, making sounds of greeting and joy. Then Bori turned back toward Taiho and chirped again, as if making an introduction. The old female began to move. She walked slowly, each step deliberate. The other Varani watched but did not follow. This was her moment, her decision. She crossed the clearing in silence, and Taiho saw the lights beneath her fur shifting through colors he could not name. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could smell her, rain and earth and something wild. Close enough that she could tear out his throat before he could even scream. They stared at each other. Taiho thought about running. He thought about the weapons locked inside the station. He thought about all the training that told him to never, ever be this close to an apex predator. Then he thought about Bori, about the trust the cub had shown him, about the bond they had formed through play and patience and a single gentle bite. He bowed his head. Not much, just enough to expose his neck. A gesture of respect, not surrender. He was acknowledging her authority without giving up his dignity. The old female went very still. Her light shifted to pale blue. Then, slowly, she pressed her massive head against his chest. Taiho stopped breathing. The weight of her was immense, warm through his thin shirt. He could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong. He could feel her breath against his skin. Then she pulled back and looked at him again. Her lights glowed gold. "She accepts you," Yuna whispered from behind him. Her voice was shaking. "Oh my God, Taiho, she accepts you." The other Varani began to move. One by one, they emerged from the trees and approached the station. Each one came to Taiho and pressed against him briefly, a shoulder, a flank, a gentle nudge of the head. Their lights glowed gold as they touched him. Gold for recognition. Gold for family. Bori bounced between them, chirping with obvious pride. "Look," the cub seemed to say. "Look at my human. He's one of us now." When the greetings were finished, the pack did not leave. They settled around the station like guards, lying in the mud, watching the jungle with alert eyes. The message was clear. This place was their territory now. This human was under their protection. Taiho sank down onto the station steps, his legs too weak to hold him. Bori immediately climbed into his lap. The old female lay nearby, her ancient eyes still watching. "What happens now?" He asked no one in particular. Yuna sat beside him, looking at the impossible scene around them. A human scientist, surrounded by a pack of alien predators, accepted as one of their own. "I have no idea," she admitted. "But I think we're about to find out." Above them, the clouds parted for a moment, letting golden sunlight fall across the clearing. It matched the glow of the Varani lights perfectly, like a blessing, like a promise, like the beginning of something new. The meeting happened at dawn, when the rain finally stopped and pale light spread across the clearing. Taiho stood between two worlds, humans on one side, Varani on the other. Bori stayed close to him, a bridge between species that should never have connected. Director Hana Song stepped forward alone. She had left her soldiers near the shuttle, despite Lieutenant Do-hwan's protests. "If this is going to work," she had said, "it needs to start with trust." The pack emerged from the jungle in formation. The old female walked at the front, her scarred face calm and ancient. Behind her came the other adults, moving in perfect silence. The juveniles stayed back, watching with curious eyes. Their lights glowed soft blue, the color of cautious peace. Hana stopped 10 meters away from the old female. The two leaders studied each other across the gap between their peoples. "What now?" Hana asked quietly. Taiho translated as best he could, using gestures and sounds he had learned from Bori. The old female listened, her head tilted slightly. Then she made a series of deep tones that Yuna's recorder captured eagerly. "She wants to know why you came with weapons," Yuna said, listening through her earpiece as her translation software struggled with the sounds. "She wants to know if you came to fight or to talk." "I came to understand," Hana replied. "Tell her that." Taiho conveyed the message. The old female's lights flickered through several colors before settling on pale gold. She stepped forward, closing half the distance between them. Lieutenant Do-hwan's hand moved toward his weapon. Hana raised her palm without looking at him. "Don't." The old female stopped a few meters away from Hana, close enough to kill, close enough to trust. For a long moment, nothing happened. The two leaders simply looked at each other, taking measure, recognizing something across the impossible gap between their kinds. Then the old female did something remarkable. She lowered herself to the ground and rolled onto her back, exposing her belly and throat to the human director. The most vulnerable position possible. A gesture that said, "I give you power over my life. I trust you not to take it." The other Varani went absolutely still. Even Bori stopped breathing. This was unprecedented. No pack leader had ever shown such submission to an outsider. In their culture, this gesture meant either complete surrender or complete faith. Hana understood. Somehow, without words, she understood exactly what was being offered. She walked forward until she stood directly over the old female. The moment stretched like glass. One wrong move and everything would shatter. Slowly, carefully, Hana knelt down. She placed her hand against the old female's chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath the black fur. Then she bowed her own head, exposing her neck in return. "I see you," she said softly. "I acknowledge you. I accept your trust." The old female's lights exploded into brilliant gold. She rose smoothly to her feet and pressed her massive head against Hana's shoulder. A greeting, a blessing, an acceptance. Around them, the pack began to glow. One by one, their lights shifted to gold, spreading through the group like sunrise through clouds. The juveniles chirped excitedly. The adults made low, musical sounds that filled the clearing with harmony. Yuna was crying. She wiped her eyes and kept recording, determined to capture every moment. What did I just agree to? Hana asked, slightly dazed. Taiho smiled. I think you just became an honorary member of the pack. Welcome to the family, Director. The days that followed changed everything. Director Hana canceled the removal order and reclassified Vira 4 from a research outpost to a first contact diplomatic zone. Lieutenant Dohan was reassigned to a less sensitive posting. His weapons-first approach had no place in what was to come. Taiho became the official human liaison to the Virani, with Yuna as his partner in developing a shared language. They worked slowly, patiently, learning to communicate through sounds and lights and gestures. Progress was measured in small victories, a new word understood, a concept translated, a joke that made both species laugh. The pack grew to accept other humans, but never quickly. Each new person had to be tested. They had to prove themselves patient and respectful. They had to understand that among the Virani, trust was earned, not given, and they had to be willing to bite back. It became a tradition. When a human was ready to be accepted, a young Virani would approach them and offer the sacred bite. The human would bite back, gentle and deliberate, and the lights would turn gold. Pack law applied across species. Other worlds heard about. Vihara 4. Scientists and diplomats arrived to study the first peaceful contact between humans and non-humanoid intelligence. They asked endless questions. How did it start? What made it possible? How could something so unlikely become something so real? Taiho always told them the same story. About a lonely man and a curious cub. About a playful bite returned without thinking. About the moment when the rules stopped mattering and the connection began. We didn't tame them, he would say. We didn't conquer them. We just showed them that we were worth knowing. They did the rest. 6 months after the first contact, Taiho sat outside the expanded station complex at sunset. The rain had finally stopped for good, revealing a sky painted with purple and gold. Bori lay beside him, no longer a cub, but a young adult, strong and sleek and devoted. Director Hana had gone back to the stars, but she visited often. Yuna had become fluent in Virani speech, spending more time with the pack than with humans. The old female, whom everyone now called grandmother, had become a familiar presence at diplomatic meetings, her ancient eyes watching humanity's representatives with knowing patience. A group of new arrivals gathered nearby, waiting for their introduction to the pack. They looked nervous, excited, uncertain of what they would find. One of them approached Taiho, a young man with scared eyes and trembling hands. Sergeant Park, he said. How do you do it? How do you make them trust you? Taiho scratched behind Bori's ears and felt the familiar warmth of gold light against his fingers. He thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the wonder, the impossible gift of being chosen by creatures he'd been trained to avoid. You don't make them do anything, he said. You just show up. You pay attention. You learn their ways and respect their choices. And when they offer you something precious, you don't hesitate to give something precious back. The young man nodded slowly. That's it? That's the secret? That's everything. Taiho smiled. Now go meet your new family. He watched the young man walk toward the waiting Virani, toward a future that nobody could have predicted. Behind him, grandmother emerged from the trees, her lights glowing soft gold in the fading light. She settled beside Taiho, A massive shoulder pressed against his small human frame. Together, they watched the sunset paint the sky. Two species. One pack, one promise. The bite that bound them would never break.